but I imagine is much less, certainly half or less. And as part of that, we had a discussion. Remember, last time we had a discussion about trails for those that were here, and working with the developer, we're trying to see if we can get trails within the neighborhood and the development. Initially, we asked for a trail on Canyon Creek. That's going to come in phase two. Phase two will be the development there. So I don't know if we'll get a trail there, but we're going to keep trying. But also came from that discussion the idea of having trails within within the neighborhood. And then that evolved into a discussion of um, making some of the sidewalks more trail-like, wider. And and so the developer working with the city, we came up with two potential options. And then this week we had a meeting with Public Works, and it was deemed that this bottom cross section was worthy of consideration. And staff, meaning myself, all of the Public Works, Lance, Ty, Teresa was there. We recommended that we take this to Planning Commission, and then if Planning Commission recommends it, then it would go to City Council to be added to our standards. And let me show you what it's replacing.
So just to be clear on this, the blue saying not considering this anymore, we're.
Yes, we're just looking at the bottom one.
Okay.
And because of time, we just didn't have, it was just easier to send that over. Yes, and so it's for what's called the collector street. It still is two travel lanes, so it's not wider than two travel lanes, other than a potential turning lane at an intersection. And let me show you what it would replace. So this is from our standards right here. You look at this. This is on your second page, but also on the screen. So 66 feet. We're not changing the right of way width. And then the difference is instead of 41 feet of asphalt, that drops to 35 feet of asphalt. And then we get an 8-foot sidewalk / trail. And then the park strips get a little bit wider at 6.5 feet on each side. And then the other sidewalk would be 5 feet. I'm still blown away that the developer's even entertaining that they would build this for this. There has been no commitment of offering anything other than maybe when that sidewalk and trail is built. But there was no offer by the city to cover that extra concrete cost, although there is less asphalt cost, so maybe that's a little bit of a trade. Now, a couple things on this. The benefit of the wider park strip is you can preserve sidewalks better because the trees have more space to grow. You know, you get the less popping of the sidewalks, more room for snow storage during the wintertime when we're pushing snow. Also, it's easier to maintain a landscape strip, especially if it's grass, if it's wider. Sprinklers just don't work on 5 feet very well. 6.5, much better. 8 is even better, but there's a big difference there. And then also it just looks a little bit nicer, more landscape. The benefit and this is just on the collector, which would be the 540 east. I'll pull up a map here in a second. So we'd get the benefit of the trail, just better. It'd be used by kids, primarily bikes, running, a neighborhood collector trail that would connect from 540 up heading towards Island Road. And then with the reduction of asphalt, Public Works doesn't see it being an issue. 35 feet of asphalt is plenty of room for 2 travel lanes, on-street parking. And then at the intersection, close to the intersection, there would not be on-street parking. That's where you would use that turn lane. Questions? You want to see the road that we're talking about for that?
Is the main benefit we're going for the park strip and all of that, or is it to get the trail on the side, more space for the wider walking area?
Both.
Okay.
Well, there's a big benefit to both, but definitely the trail is driving that.
Okay.
And you're
And-
saying that oh, go ahead and finish.
Well, that was just it, because if it's trails, and I think I mean, a few of us were at maybe it's two of us were at the meeting last night with the county, going over several things with the way the trails hopefully would start connecting from the county into the city and beyond. So this could work well.
And this just gives us a new tool, and it doesn't replace this cross section, it adds to it. So it's another tool for that. I'll just gonna kind of sketch and show you where we're talking about 540. So from here up to there. That right, Teresa?
So through Pheasant Run.
Yeah, and it would just be for new development. We're not going back and ripping anything out or any of that.
What's the current road there? Is it following the old standard?
Um,
That's following this one?
yes, there it is right there.
And you're saying the developer proposed this or?
It was a dialogue, but we started the conversation and then they came up with some ideas and we did and it was one meeting and a lot of emails and back and forth and just kind of seeing what would work.
So with that, then, from a trails perspective, it's just that section, obviously. It doesn't really help with the rest of the roads that are already there. We'd have to,
True, but it adds to the network. And anytime you add to the network, that's good. And then also brings this tool online that could be used for other developments in other parts of the city. And it could even become if we like it, it could become the preferred collector. Anytime there's a new development or neighborhood and we have a collector, let's have a trail on it. And
Kind of a way just to promote a trail integration going forward.
yeah.
This is just for the red line you do.
Yes.
What about all the other roads out in the subdivision?
Those would be the one that fits our standards already. Yes, yeah. Yeah, that would be, what they're proposing and looking at is, I'll just tell you what it is. I don't know that it's on here. That would be 32 feet of asphalt, which is the state maximum for a local residential neighborhood, 6.5 foot park strips, 5 foot sidewalks. And a 5 foot sidewalk is the new city standard. As of a couple years ago, we moved from 4 to 5. And the problem with 4 is you can't walk two people side by side. You have to do one in front and the other. And a 5 foot park strip works, but 6.5 it actually helps, just getting a couple more feet in there in terms of preserving the sidewalks, having healthy trees.
Did you say local one or local two?
It's local 1. So that's what they'll use in the rest of the neighborhood and
32 feet.
yes, yep. And we don't need to make any changes on that because that's already allowed and approved per current city standard.
so is the,
That's the typo here, that local one, the parcel should have 6, but I can't read.
Yeah, 6 feet, 6 inches.
But you said 5.
Oh, I meant 6. I think it is 6.
But I'm not there.
Yeah, sidewalk is 5 and then the park strip is 6 feet, 6 inches.
So is the purpose for us to just discuss if we think this is a good idea?
Yeah, I just, I kind of want to bring this before you. I don't know how much of you've discussed the engineering and design standards in the past. It is, city ordinance requires that the city council make the decision on it, but, we wanted to just bring this book, and it's also a follow-up with our discussion last week when we talked about trails and the planning commission said, yes, we want more trails. We didn't necessarily have specific, how are we going to go about paying for them or bringing them about kind of thing. But this is one way, and it actually won't cost the city any more money.
I think it's an easy call. Yeah, it sounds like if it's other things we want, if they'll do it, we'll go for it. I think the discussion from there is, well, then how do you do the rest of it? You know, that obviously is a kind of its own little section that doesn't have anything that it flows into yet.
Either end never will.
Right, unless there's, a major facelift.
Neither end never will.
If a street is completely rebuilt, it could go to the new cross section.
You rebuild those brand new roads.
I'm saying 20 or 30.
Yeah, currently that one was that.
Yeah, and we don't want that to happen, right? There are a lot of money.
Stars and universe, currently that road.
It-
It's going into two brand new roads. It won't be rebuilt, the brand new road.
You said it's going into 400 west? Is that the one?
525. Yep, Scott's Drive right there. We'll connect there.
Right.
And then up to 5 or 400.
It's going into 400.
Yep.
Now, I haven't been down there forever. Webster Road, is that one paved? Or is that dirt?
Webster Lane, no.
Okay, so this is just me, sorry if I'm blathering here, but if from the city's perspective, we can get the Mickelson Mile to keep going down the river, I don't know what side it's gonna go down. And these trails are gonna feed over to that, because to me, that's kind of the main.
That's the
Road there.
idea.
So which road could we look at here? If that's what I'm saying, Webster Lane, if it's not done, but a road has to go in there, could that become the collector? Now, I know this isn't,
An additional collector.
okay. So from there, though, is there a way to get,
That never happened.
Webster Lane's not.
Webster Lane's too narrow.
is that,
It'll never happen. Webster Lane, the hits on the road is too narrow.
It-
It'll never happen.
you can't put this size on that one?
You got people's homes too close. It'll never happen.
There's not.
The end of Webster Lane as it hits Island Road is not wide enough.
Right.
Good idea, but it ain't gonna happen.
Well, I'm just saying, if there's a road that is done, what's possible there, because what has to happen there is either you have to get, that's the substation at the end of 400 West.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So can we put a trail right through that? Did you see that? Did you see that video of that lady in Salt Lake that climbed up on that substation?
It's great. You just have to jog.
was it?
all the way.
Well, maybe right there in the
There you go.
middle.
There
Maybe
you go.
there's a gap in the middle.
I don't know. I'm just thinking like, to me,
How do you
to,
cross the river? with
how,
it?
how do you complete this idea? And if we set it up, and I agree, like the street's not ever gonna get redone. However, if you know that's the pathway and there's other ways to maybe do it with some fancy lines on the road, but if you can get that all the way to the river access and then that's where the trail would eventually come in, then that.
Talking about a loop.
Well, what, in my humble opinion on this, is if the Mickelson Mile, which would be more than a mile, just done, or the river walk, we'll call that, if that is kind of the main thing through town, which I think would be absolutely amazing, is the ultimate, like, that's the collector for all the trails. You have a way to get from all these neighborhoods into that. That gets you gets you to the park, gets you to the schools, gets you close to Commercial Street or our commercial downtown. Then what we try to encourage with the road and these things works if it builds towards that. And if that's an avenue to get over there to the river, then I think that fits. But I know that's,
But the problem
A
is,
lot of work.
400 West meets Island Road, to go across there, that's a substation right there.
well, that's what I'm saying is if the city, but that's city property right there, right? The substation's all city owned? Or is there a little bit of,
Sounds Rocky. Rocky Mountain.
is it Rocky Mountain? Okay. Half and half. All I'm saying is it gets you to the river. maybe.
So,
Um,
so if you continue on, got your idea.
Yeah.
You continue on with the subdivision going into the second phase, or whatever phase, and it goes straight. Sorry. And it goes straight on there instead of, you know, heading up to 400 north, it just goes straight, then the other trail that's gonna come, hopefully, along the river, cross from Mickelson Mile over to where the city owns the fishing pond,
Mhm.
through there, and
Yeah,
I mean, there's a better possibility instead of going to 400 north to just continue on.
I'm saying from all these new subdivisions, if you have hiking or trails or whatever you want to call these, walking
Yeah.
paths that all feed over to the Riverwalk, that fits, I think, with what we've kind of discussed. So for this discussion, if you can add amenities to the road that allow for better walking and traveling, by all means, let's go for it. But it continued, but the conversation that we were going to talk about later with the trails is, okay, well, how do you actually see that vision come to fruition there? And a lot of, obviously, discussion with landowners that go along the river there, but this gets you there and you're just gonna have to cross that bridge.
So, Mr. Chair, can I make a comment? On, the park strip is 6'6", right, Jake? The sidewalk's 5.
On one
What-
side, yep.
What happens to a 5'6" park strip and a 6-foot sidewalk? Just,
Oh, could we do that? You could do that. I think it would, I think it's just more concrete cost. With a 6 foot, 6 foot's kind of an in-between. You know, 5 is great for 2 people walking. For like a multi-way trail, 8 foot is definitely the minimum. 10 is nice, 12 is I-15. And so, it's a nominal gain. I don't think you necessarily end up with that much better of a sidewalk going to 6
from
foot.
my experience, walking in front of my house, a 4-foot sidewalk.
Yeah.
And we have to stagger, me and my wife. But when we get up past the cemetery, it turns into a 5-foot, and you can walk side by side. But one more foot would even be better.
It would be a little roomier. There is that cost though.
A new subdivision, can't they recover that cost on selling it?
Maybe.
Okay, just a thought.
Yeah, I like the idea of that. And certainly commercial areas would want to be pushing for a lot wider.
So a couple of things. One is just looking at the street section, hearing Justin's comments, it does feel like, at least from my perspective, that's absolutely worth pursuing. You know, as far as a new cross section, having that standard. What I do like though is the strategy, and I don't know if it makes sense to state that somewhere, but if the Riverwalk is the inner city trail system, that everything should lead there eventually. And if it's, and if we state that as a strategy somehow, some way, I think then it starts to come to fruition like you're talking about. Otherwise, we'll have a lot of hodgepodge pieces here and there, which we're probably gonna have anyway, and over time, those will come together, but.
Yeah, it's far better to have that than nothing. I mean, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And you already have a good
How
start.
is this normal sidewalk in like a neighborhood, not a collector street?
5 feet is a traditional standard of like last 10 to 15 years. Morgan went from 4 to 5 to 2.5 years ago. So most of your sidewalks in the city probably are 4 feet. So even that 5 feet is gonna feel a little bit roomier, like the mayor mentioned.
6 inches of grass on either side that grow over.
Yeah,
3 feet.
and those 3 feet one from the 50s are like single file, absolutely.
And Mickelson Mile, do you have any idea how wide is that?
I think you're 10, what are you?
We were saying in some areas it's 10, can be up to 12 feet. meanders a little bit.
The asphalt trail by the river. Yeah.
We were just talking about this
Maybe-
on Monday and our staff
My only
said
thought
that's how wide it is.
If you had that wide trail on one side, is there any reason to have that? Cause you gotta kind of, it's almost like you got the passing lane on the trail side. Do you need it to be wide enough on both sides? Like, would it make sense in any way to have a 4-foot sidewalk on one side? If you have the ultra wide one on the other side of the road?
Oh,
You know what I mean?
I still wouldn't go 4. 4 is almost not, yeah. I don't think we want to go down on one side.
Okay.
Think about we're trading some asphalt for lower cost asphalt at more square footage for lesser or more cost per square foot concrete, but we're having a little bit less. So that is the trade-off.
Look, a good trade to me, but I could
Yes.
be wrong.
It is. And because you don't need 41. 41 feet's really wide asphalt. I mean, you can almost drive 4 cars
Hmm.
down and it really increases the tendency to speed. That wide open road, you just wanna punch your Ford 150 or whatever.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
one of the things that we were talking about, this is just gonna be this first project would be this 525 West. And Ray had said, well, we've got new road on both sides. Well, the road is still the same wider, just as wide, but it's just asphalt. There could be a potentially to, when the sidewalk, the 8-foot sidewalk ends, is to actually bring a bike lane stripe on the asphalt. And then it'll look continuous into Young Street and Island Road. That could be fix it right away. But the whole intent is let's get biking and walking people off the road. And that's, but that could be how we try to connect. And then when Young Street gets its additional sidewalk on the one side, you're right there.
It feels smart. And what'd you call that? Creative painting or striping?
Yes,
Something?
Biking and walking usage, especially by kids and women, goes way up when the trail is in a safe, protected environment. Like when it's off the road. Guys also goes up, but not as much, but we're a little bit dumber that way, but women and kids, they want to be away from the cars and it's smart.
You gonna say something,
I
right?
just got to voice another concern. At this point, I'm not in favor of the 6'6" park strips. Prior home I had in another city, they had a 10-foot park strip and a meter's away. So you're playing football game out in the front yard, sidewalk in the middle of your field. And the rationale you used, Jake, I liked everything you said, made some sense. Talked to our snow people today and they said they didn't need it for snow storage, which is one of the reasons you used to have it. As far as trees and sidewalks, yeah, that's an issue. There's nowhere in town we have park strips that are nearly that wide, except where a ditch we have to maintain in the middle of them. So I'm not a fan of going to 6-foot park strips. Or 6.5-foot park
Is it
strips.
still a dry scape rule?
No, that hasn't changed. You could put grass in it. So.
What's our minimum width for grass?
Well, it's whatever there is no minimum. You could do 1 foot. There's no minimum.
Before we talked about in front of side yard, if you had less than 6 feet, you couldn't sprinkler.
I don't think it's not in the landscape ordinance.
I'll go back and find it
We-
for you. Yeah, you put it
Oh,
in.
in the MRO.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just in the MRO.
The traditional subdivision.
Yeah, this is
But
traditional.
why should it be different?
Cause
You can water one piece of grass, but you can't water another one?
that applies only to the mixed residential ordinance.
There's my question. Why should it apply to in one area I can't water a 6 foot of grass, another area I can?
with the mixed residential overlay, the idea was increase the requirements for landscaping, more trees, more shrubs, because we were adding some density, and then also increase the water-wise conservation for that. It was kind of a package deal. But that just applied to that ordinance.
Okay. Yes, in my mind, I still see that as a double standard. If you do this ordinance, you can. If you do this regular one, you can't.
We also have
We'll fix it,
architecture
yeah.
requirements for the MRO. I mean, it was,
The whole ordinance would be a double standard, then we're
Yeah.
granting different density and usage, and it's a different proposition for developers. In my mind, I don't see a disparity.
Okay.
okay. And any final comments? That was more of a discussion item before we send it on to the council.
I've got a trail thing I wanted to ask about, but I don't want to take up any more work.
So I guess the question, this is called a standard.
Yeah.
And that's codified into ordinance.
Yes, but there's multiple options. It's not necessarily have to do this optional. Think of it as a tool.
Okay, so it's not something that we would have a public hearing on and send to the city council. We can talk about it in a work session just so there's input, and then it goes to the city.
I think, they'll have to do a public hearing.
It's, it would be an ordinance
change. It's either a change in the standard.
Teresa has an answer for this.
So it's not in the ordinance, it's in the city standards, but the standards are adopted by the city council. So I don't know if the city council has a public hearing, but really it's not a land use or in the land use ordinance section, the standards.
They're required to have a public hearing on the.
In
once
her-
a year, they update those.
Yeah, once a year, we have the public hearing and redo the design standards.
And that would be in the city council public hearing, not here.
So there's nothing that the commission has to do. The whole point of this conversation is just to get some input.
Yeah, get some input, follow up on trails. So I believe in December at the next city council, we'll do the public hearing and they'll vote on this.
So
Yes.
You want to add anything else?
Okay,
When do we approve that, the regulations?
Well,
It's usually the
I'd
first of the
rather
year.
have Matt go through it, and if they're gonna make any other changes that they've come up with over the last, then give him some time to go through the design standards, make those changes, and we do it all at once.
I'll ask him if he has anything else he wants to change so we could bundle it.
So you're trying to get this pushed through for the,
They're ready to
Current
make it, they're
subdivision.
ready to make an application on it. And if we want to have a trail in it on the main collector, then this is our opportunity.
concrete trail, not asphalt.
Yep.
So explain to me, sorry, I saw this come through today, but, the other day. This is one of the requirements in the engineer standards, right?
Mhm.
And is it a mandated requirement, or is it one option that a developer can choose, or is it an option that the city can impose on the developer?
That's a good question. So it's one option for the collector. I don't know whether, in this case, the developer wants to do it. They're working with us.
Yeah.
And
The developer wants to do it, that's one.
And that's it in this case. Question is if in the future the city wants to have this more often, which may be the case. Or maybe it's an option as well.
So the way it would be provided in the standard is it would be provided as a standard that a developer could choose to adopt. And the city would have approved it ahead of time in the standards.
Yeah.
But not one that the city would necessarily impose, right, as a requirement.
I would rather we do more trails, but we didn't get to that part of that discussion. If it was a replacement, the staff public works meeting, everybody thought this was a better solution than the previous cross section.
Well,
On
it's
it.
definitely a better solution, but the question I have is. Now, the subdivision ordinance requires that once they've met all the standards in the subdivision ordinance and the standards in the engineering standards, we must approve the project. And so the question is, can we impose this on one developer and a different one on another developer? Because this.
Yeah,
But are
it's,
streets designated at time of inception as a collector versus a whatever?
yes,
Um,
yes,
So could you just have that being mandated for collector?
it could be the new collector.
But may I say something? Your point, Gary, if it's gonna come to city council, I gotta be clear on what we're talking about here. Is it going to be mandated or is it going to be optional from that developer?
And that's my question.
That's mine too,
Because if you're gonna impose this on everybody that comes in, every development that comes in, and it's the staff's decision as to whether or not they post this or number 2 or number 3, then, I mean, there's a big difference between putting this in and a 52-foot right of way.
Just fine.
And I can see where
Designated as,
developer-
I mean, in my opinion, make it very clear. If you can say collectors have to be made this way, do it. I mean, we want the trails, we want the walking space. Make that the new standard, they have to, because if you give them a choice, they're gonna go with the one that costs less and easier to do. So if it's a collector standard, collector street, I would say do it.
Yeah, the question of a collector or not is, that's decided, no, that's decided by the master planning and
Okay.
transportation plan and the engineer. They don't get to choose that. The question about which cross section, the one with more, 41 feet of asphalt or 35 with the trail. I think we need to have more discussion on how we recommend that part of it.
But to that point, if they come in with a proposal for a project and they don't choose if it's a collector or not, but through the process, okay, that's going to be a collector, and as a collector, here's the standard. And if it's not designated as a collector, then they use the other standard. To me, that feels like a relatively easy way to distinguish the two.
So does that mean some streets in the subdivision might be designated as a collector and other streets in the same subdivision might be other than collector?
Correct, yeah.
Just be that one. Be that one they show. All the rest will be different.
And there, right now, how it works, at least on the non-collector roads, there is some option and flexibility, a little bit of process. There's different things, and there's the question about what's mandated, but there's also the question about what are our, street tools in terms of cross sections and things like that.
One other reason to push this though is in the collector, and you've said it before too, the demand for housing lots, whatever it is going to be, it's more attractive and you can ask a higher price when it's connected to a trails network. And if you can do that, like that's the whole idea here, is we start to make these all to that end, we've got some pieces to connect, but just makes total sense in my opinion, so.
And I just think it's great that the developer's willing to work with us on this.
But it messes it up if a developer should be doing it, but or has an option out of it. So
Yeah.
you
And
gotta
I think
say do it.
We'll have to have more discussions on that, and maybe it gets built and then we analyze it and.
Could Chair, I don't want
Yeah,
to take
go
over. Teresa, do you have the map that shows all the zoning and the parcel ownership?
I could just pull it up.
The county one, but something just popped up when I was looking at it that is right in line with this particular project and development. But really, as you look at the growth for our city, anyway, it's all going that direction. And so it's gonna play. That last tab had it.
Let's just go right here.
Zoom in right on the Island Road where we were, and there's this, and it plays in with the trail. Do you mind if I go for
Yeah,
it?
go ahead.
I've got, I don't want to get with that.
You know what?
Okay, so this right here was very intriguing to me. Zoom pulled us down a little bit. Actually, and then zoom out a couple clicks. Okay, so the trail, the whole trail and the Trails Committee, and you were there last night and you saw it. The idea is to put a connector between Mountain Green, the dirt spot, and Morgan, okay? One of the options, and when I say it's an option with a lot of question marks on it, because you gotta have some nice partners with the railroad and UDOT. But this, you already have frontage road all the way down between the railroad tracks and the freeway, right? Well, the question then is, how do you bring it into the city? Well, if I understand this, you already have an underpass here, right? The city, now go ahead and zoom in right here. Is this just a utility right away? That's, if you go down a little bit, I mean, you got this road, but right here, see this?
Oh, yeah.
This little strip, and it goes all the way to Commercial Street, right past Turner's, which they wouldn't like, but.
Oh.
So if you zoom back out a little bit, it gets you right, keep going, gets you all the way into Island Road. Right here, right? Now, we're talking about right here, but this plays in where this trail system coming from Mountain Green or that side of the valley comes into Morgan City. And the more you can develop the trails through here, the better it's going to be for us. But that's one of the options being considered. Again, a lot of people are having to play nice on that. But if you've already got access through here, that's already city property. And we're not talking about necessarily a paved path. It can be gravel. I mean, there's a lot of path that would have to be paved otherwise. But that plays in very nicely with where we're talking about all this is going to be the new development for Morgan City growth, right? Almost everything's going that direction. Then this needs to start that process. And I think the more you can say any collector in that area starts to collecting over there, we'll have to figure out what to do with Island Road if you can put some extra space there. But if you can go from there and get them over to the River Walk Trail, then you're in really good shape. But I just wanted to point that out. I didn't see that strip there. That might make the whole trails thing easier. Anyway, that's all I wanted to show. It's all part of that trails network. That's a possibility.
Thanks, Justin.
Cool.
What else with the street section discussion are you looking for, Jake?
I think that's good.
So we have about 15 minutes before we transition to our general session, which will be covering the new subdivision ordinance. Did you want to spend a couple of minutes talking through some of that before we get into the general session?
Yeah, okay, we could do a little bit of background. So, we have a draft
Wait,
subdivision.
before you do that, I was gonna ask Gary, when we do the public hearing, can I combine them into one public hearing? We open it once for the two pieces. We don't have to open one public hearing and close it, then open another public hearing and close it.
Is it, are they both no, you can open the public hearing.
And
then
cover both agenda
Cover both
items.
agenda items if you wanted to.
Okay. It just feels like that'll be a little more smooth.
The only reason I wouldn't do that is if you had a great big crowd for
Right.
one particular application, but
Exactly.
if you don't have a big crowd,
I
you're
don't
good to do
anticipate
both at
any
the same time.
specials.
And also along those lines, that essentially they're combined because we're intermingling the ordinance. We're moving one thing from one ordinance to another. So they're working in conjunction together.
Same subject matter.
Yes.
So
So on that, so what we decided to do is, in Morgan City ordinance, in chapter 10, our land use, we have a definitions section. Also in the subdivision section, we have definitions. And we were adding new definitions with the new subdivision ordinance. And in previous discussions and at staff, we decided and recommended, let's just have a single, and when it comes to land use, let's just have a single section that has all the definitions instead of parceling out separating out the definitions. So what we're proposing is migrating all of the current definitions that are in the subdivision ordinance over to the new definitions, and then also adding new subdivision definitions in the chapter 10.04. That way, if you have any land use definitions, subdivision or land use zoning, you just go to that single location. Yep. And then how I did it in terms of the draft is anything in gray is existing from the code and not intended to change. And the text in blue was new definitions. Any question on that part? That's the 10. Okay, for the next section, the subdivision, I think it's most useful to use our two diagrams, our tables. As a reminder, anytime we say subdivision, we're talking 6 or more lots. If it's a minor subdivision, so we decided last time, no major subdivision, a minor subdivision or a regular subdivision. And a minor is 5 or less. And then the major is, sorry, no major, just a regular subdivision is 6 or more. And so we have essentially 2 tracks, although they're very close. I'm gonna scroll down to those here. This next one has this is a little bit different than you saw before. We added essentially the 2 tracks for the subdivision. Regular subdivision or the minor subdivision. And the biggest difference is that the minor subdivision is pre-plat approval is staff level, and then also final plat is staff level. It doesn't come here to planning commission. And then conventional subdivision of 6 or more lots will come to planning commission for your approval. And also what we discussed last time that's in here is that there is a review of the preliminary plat before you see it. So right here, this step number 3 under pre-plat, review of application by administrative staff, and then comments. So we get the
for us, it's, I mean, I don't really. The word rubber stamp comes to mind, but I mean, is that kind of the process at that point? Because there's no. And then we can give them some friendly advice.
Sure. And I think one of the things that we run into is the distinction between administrative and legislative on this, is that sometimes, you know, we all have opinions and we all think this is a good idea, or this is a bad idea. But I mean, that's not, we shouldn't even, we can voice a thought, but we can't really say, you know, you can't do this if everything's met there. So I guess my question is if you guys reviewed it and knew it wasn't meeting standards, like why even come to us? And like, why would you even let the applicant make that next step?
It's their,
Should we allow them
it's
to-
their due right. It's their due process.
They have the right to be told no?
What do you say, Gary?
Well, sometimes there are a number of situations where the applicant can go a couple of different directions. For example, you know, a T intersection at the end, or a cul-de-sac, or you know, just the shape of the streets or where they connect, those types of things. Those are not things that are expressly stated in the ordinance. They just simply say that where staff and the planning commission have reviewed it, you know, you can make a determination. I don't think it'll be that much different than what you're thinking, what you do right now, because this is what you should be doing right now, which is just applying the ordinance to the fact situation that is before you. And if you don't like, right now, if you don't like something staff has done, and your idea is consistent with the ordinance, you can impose that additional requirement.
I guess there's exceptions that we, maybe there was something missed, and that's what our job would be, like, hey, this was missed.
Very
But-
much so, yeah.
Or also, like you said, maybe the ordinance doesn't clearly define it, and that would be for us to be like, it's not clearly defined, and also give us kind of almost a trigger to go back and say, hey, we gotta make a change in the ordinance, because this is too confusing, and we keep getting people to come in for that.
That's a really good point. Interpretation is what you do. You are the guardians of the city's ordinance, city zoning ordinance. And so your interpretation can be challenged, you know, if the developer doesn't agree with it, but there's a lot of areas where you'll do the interpreting of the ordinance. Staff will do it, and then you'll say, well, wait a second, we don't quite see it that way, or we do. Yeah, does that make sense? Or, okay.
We just don't want to give applicants the runaround. I think that's just, it's as frustrating for us and puts us in a really weird spot as it is for them, because they're confused, like, well, what was I supposed to do? And we're like, well, why is it even here? And I don't want to run into either scenario if we can help it.
That's why they did this to us up at the legislature. So it's because of the runarounds that they were getting. So not here, but in other cities. So
This table kind of says, you know, who does what. And again, at the pre-plat, that's the planning commission subdivision. If there's an overlay, then that still would go to the city council, because that's a legislative. You would make the recommendation. and that would go in terms of the development agreement. The rezone would be, would still be legislative, but following the plat would be the typical process.
Anything else to add in our work session?
I got a bunch of stuff. We want to start now.
Whatever you'd like. We've got 3 minutes before we should.
3 minutes. Okay. Question for Gary on this front ordinance page. Section 1. If you'll pull up, look at that. And it says section 1 repealer. If any provisions of the Morgan City Code hereafter adopted or inconsistent hereby they are hereby repealed. Help me understand what that means. Anything that's not in here is repealed that contradicts it, or what does that mean for us?
So if there's some other provision of the code that is in contradiction to this, then it would be considered not valid or repealed.
And this would be not valid, or the
No.
code would be not valid.
That provision of the code would be, we're putting in a new provision governing subdivisions. So if there's something else in another section of the code, for example, maybe likely in the zoning
You're
code
right.
that was in conflict, that would no longer be enforced.
The other part would be repealed. Okay. Okay.
We hope we caught them all, but sometimes you don't, so.
In the definitions, the very first time, do we need to have anything about ADUs? There's nothing there. I mean, that's a new concept we brought forward. There's no definition about what an ADU is in the definitions.
Yeah.
I said it has to be. It's a question, do you want it to be there?
We did add, that's a good question, and we did add definitions for the ADU ordinance, and it's in that ordinance.
So it doesn't need to be here necessarily.
Maybe what, at a minimum, I would say, let's add it here and then reference that other ordinance.
That's thought I had.
I think it's great. That's a good point.
Okay.
Or we could bring them all over and reference back. No. Okay. Sorry, Teresa. It does.
Yeah, it does. So
It does.
that's just a question whether you need to or not. Maybe you don't need to. I don't
I
know.
remember when we did that.
In the zoning ordinance, or I can't remember. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Going on to page 5, building residential.
Definitions or?
Definitions, yeah. Does that include, this includes 1 or 2 family, doesn't include 4plexes or apartments or 6plexes in that definition. The new one you added. I don't know if it needs to or not.
I think that's a good point. I think we should add that. I mean,
Anyway, I don't, it just says 1 or 2 family. We also have 4plexes, 6plexes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why they would be left out of that definition.
okay.
We divide it, multifamily residential. What do we use to describe? I think we'll look at that. That's a good.
Next one, the child care center. The very last line says 6 more children during that part of any day. I think the word "the" maybe doesn't need to be there, during
Okay.
part of any day.
Okay.
Page 6, under clinical, dental, and medical. And maybe this is just, I don't understand terminology, maybe Jessica can help me on this one. Where it says, include inpatient care. If I go to the dentist, he does work on my teeth, is that inpatient care, or does inpatient care mean something different?
We think so. Which definition was it again?
Clinical, dental, and medical.
Oh, okay.
But that second last sentence says does not include inpatient care.
Inpatient care to me means, where you stay the night. Outpatient.
And that's what I'm wondering, it could just be a definition, difference.
Oh, yeah, there it says, or operating rooms for major surgery.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, it does not include that.
The word common,
We need to wrap up our
Okay.
work session. We will convene and revisit this as part of our general session. So let's take our positions on the rostrum. Whatever this is called.
What is it?
There we go.
Podium.
Brown.
Yeah. They've been there 3 months, but it's only a 6-month mission, so they're halfway through, but they're finally getting their stride and getting busy. Working at the. Center a lot, working with some of the younger groups in the area, so.
Otherwise, it defaults.
They're loving it.
Standard, which isn't bad.
Got one.
Except for we want everything to predicate. So challenging commission or a staff decision on subdivision. We want it to be on the record. We don't want to bring everybody in again. and have it conflict with everything else.
Okay, on the record. Okay,
So-
you'll give me that language or you'll have
I've
that?
got it for you. Yeah.
Okay, great.
We'll figure out a place to have it.
There's your bigger copy of
Okay.
that, the new one.
Oh, thanks.
You have a second one?
Yeah, do you want me to go print?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want a bigger copy of this?
Oh, I still love paper.
Yeah, no, that'll be good.
Yeah. I do. I need paper. These things are, they're great, but they're just not the same. I still pull a book off the shelf. It's not good. Look at the code book, or look at the Constitution. You want to hold it, look at it, read it.
Are you okay?
Oh, yeah.
Getting started, Teresa?
Do you have cataract surgery? Have you ever had cataract surgery? I never had glasses until I had cataract surgery. Hang on as long as. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that. The difficulty is one eye sees the long ways away and the one.
All right, welcome everyone. Today is Tuesday, November 19th. Welcome to all of you for tonight's Planning Commission meeting. Thank you for the commissioners for your service. Appreciate that. Staff for helping make this happen and members of the community for joining. If you haven't already, would you mind signing in? Great, thank you. Welcome. Unanimous. The minutes are approved. We will proceed with our agenda. The first two agenda items are related. And we will take those, this is how I will approach this. So the first item with respect to the new subdivision ordinance that is being proposed, as well as the definitions, which is item number 2, that relate to land use. We'll review both of those a little bit simultaneously. We'll vote on them separately, but we'll review them together. The way that I want to do this, and make sure I get this right, Gary, is I'd like to start off with a review from staff with Jake talking through kind of the what's changing with each of those 2 ordinances. And then from there, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Give the public an opportunity to share thoughts, step to the podium, share your name, maybe keep your thoughts to about 3 minutes. And then once we've heard everything from the public, we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll take it up as a commission. So we'll proceed that way if that works for everyone. So let's go ahead and do that. Jake, if you want to introduce the 2 ordinances.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Welcome. So just as a quick background, we're updating the subdivision ordinance. Primary driver behind that is requirements by state law to do that. And with Morgan City being a city of less than 5,000 people, then we have to do that before December 31st, or the state law kicks in automatically. Other cities of larger population and class have already done this. It was due, I think, end of January this year. So they've already been operating under this, and we learned from them as they've already gone through this process. In preparing the subdivision ordinance, we decided that rather than having 2 definitions, let's just have a single land use definition section. And so we're migrating subdivision definitions over to land use. And so all definitions will reside there in the chapter 10 of our city code. And I'm going to do a screen share here. So in the draft provided, the gray is all of the existing definitions, staying as is, no recommended changes there per chapter 10. And then the blue definitions are the new ones migrating over from subdivision. And also the new definitions being added in terms of that. I'll just run through some of we don't need to go through these. It's a 50-page document, but we'll go through some of the new definitions. Access point, applicant, who is the applicant? What are they applying for? What is a block? What is a bond agreement in terms of when a subdivision is bonded for? What is a residential building? Comment was brought up during the work session on that. Obvious, who's the city council? What is a collector street? What's a complete application? Concept plan. That was from the previous city subdivision ordinance. Cross access. Development activity, design review committee. Some of these were already in our existing subdivision ordinance. Easement, the family, we changed that to just the state code because the state code tells us exactly what the family is. So we'll just add that reference in there. Floodplain, 10-year flood, 100-year flood. General plan. Land use application. That's what a subdivision is, along with other types of land use applications. Land use authority, what is that? Lot. Master traffic and transportation plan. There's times when a subdivision is applying and we're referencing the transportation plan, and so there's a definition for that.
Just a question for you as you're going through this.
Sure.
I mean, it's clear that all the gray is existing language just being pulled in, and the blue is new language. Is it new, as in it didn't exist at all before, or is it revised? Or some of
both.
each?
It's both.
Okay.
And some of the blue terms are already in the Morgan City subdivision code, and we're just moving them over. And I highlighted that. And then also some are new definitions that we're adding, and where this is, in a new subdivision ordinance.
Okay, I was just trying to understand a little bit how much of it was completely new versus revised, but it doesn't look like we can isolate that.
I mean, I could in the future,
Yeah,
but
no, it's fine. I was just
unnecessary.
curious as we go through it.
Yeah. And when we met last month, all of these definitions were in the previous draft that we
Right.
went through. Owner, park strip, planning commission, planning department. What's a final plat? What's a preliminary plat? Protection strip, public improvements, public work standards. Secondary access, secondary water system, sensitive lands, sidewalk. Then we have a whole section on streets defining what each kind of street is, and that's important. Is it a collector street? Is it a local street? Is it our arterial street? Street stub, that's important. And also definition on who is the subdivider. Utilities, trail, water and sewer improvement district, water conveyance facility. And then zoning ordinance. I would say that about half of the blue were existing in our current subdivision ordinance, and about half are new terms that we're adding. So that's what I have for chapter 10 on the definitions. Any questions on that in terms of the background?
Not on my end. You had questions as far as some clarity on some things, or?
Can we do that now?
No, we'll discuss after the public hearing. But this is more just to get the background.
Yeah.
So.
And Ray, any grammatical or technical questions, you can just give those to us and we can update it. You don't necessarily have to give them all in the public meeting.
When would that happen?
We can do it right after
Okay, that's fine.
the meeting or,
Okay. Good.
okay. But if it's anything you want to discuss and debate, then you definitely bring those up.
Just kind of think about the definition kind of like I did before. Nothing to debate, nothing to change, other than just.
Okay.
Some of these words helping and some are kind of duplicated, so.
Okay, thank you.
Do that after, it's fine with me.
Okay. Okay, moving on then to chapter 11. Chapter 11 is our subdivision ordinance. That's what we've been working on for a number of months now. I'll go through just some of the sections. We have a section on the purpose of it, interpretation, then you'll see here definitions, see section 10.04, that's where we reference. The next section is our approval process. This is something we've added that's new. Lets people know who does what. What does city council do? What does planning commission do? What does administrative staff do? And we have, for our visitors, we have two kinds of subdivisions. If it's 5 lots or less, it's a minor subdivision, and that's staff approval through both steps. And then when we say subdivision, we're saying 6 lots or more, and that's traditional. And that was done, so if someone just has a small little subdivision, it can go through a little bit easier, less public meetings, a smoother process. So this kind of says who does what in terms of our table. If the property is in the sensitive lands, then it still comes to planning commission for approval on the sensitive lands part. So that part is not changing. And then also if it's a rezone, then that still is a legislative item for the rezone. And if there's a development agreement, then that also goes to council. The next table, approval process, I really like this. Not very many cities do this, but we saw a few cities do this and we like that, which really details the process out step by step. And this is something I think that we'll use a lot with people have questions, and so they'll know where to go. And it's all in there. The pre-application consultation is optional, and then goes right into that process. Any questions on the process table?
I thought the process table and the charts were very, very well done. Very well done. Appreciate those.
Thank you. I think that will really, we'll be referring to that a lot. So, and even with, because the subdivision process and ordinance is simplifying, that was the requirement of this, of the state code updates. It still is quite a significant process, especially if someone has never gone through a subdivision before, and so this will help them. We have a section on general design requirements. Most of the details are going to be found in the engineering standards. That's where the details lie. But the basic ones are here in the general design requirements.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Under community facilities, does the amount of community facilities, is it a percentage of the size of the subdivision? I mean, a subdivision with 200 homes in it, for example, does it have to have more public facility space than one that has 20?
No, there's no requirement for that. By community facilities, I think we're talking about just if we need a street to connect to a park or to the library or somewhere like that, more referencing it. But no, we cannot ask for more amenities based on the size of it.
Okay.
Gary, do you have a comment on that?
No, and typically community facilities are things like churches. They can be churches, they can be facilities for the city. They can be parks, they can be trails, they can be all of those things. And generally, they're not regulated very.
So a subdivision doesn't necessarily have to have a public area within that subdivision?
Except if there's a requirement that so much of the area, that the park be located in, be so much open space.
Okay,
Then that would be a requirement that you could impose.
okay.
If there's an open space requirement. That's good questions.
The next section is on general responsibilities. It kind of talks about who does what. What does the subdivider do? What does staff do? What does planning commission do? Section on that information be accurate and detailed. It's very important, obviously, with utilities and property lines and all of that things are accurate. Compliance. Morgan City has to follow state code and all applicants and process have to follow the city code. And like what was mentioned in our work session, a subdivision is now more of an administrative review and decision. And so if it is meeting the city ordinance and code, then it should be recommended, then it should be approved. But if it's not meeting all of the ordinance, all of the design standards, then there's that process to get them to that point or denial. Next section on certificates, permits, and reviews, basically walking through the different procedures, preliminary plat, final plat, how many days do we have to review the plat applications? How many days does the applicant have to update their drawings and plans and resubmit? One of the things that's different with the new subdivision requirements is there's kind of a shot clock on everything. Is how many days, once an application is in, how many days do we have to respond? How many days before we get it back to them, and then they have to respond if it's moving forward. And so each time it's kind of always tracking on that. And that's in the ordinance. And everything we have in here is per state code. We're not changing or adding to that.
Go ahead, Ray.
I like what you put in there. You got very well said, and it's very understandable. Does that time frame coincide with when they need to come to the planning commission, or is that going to cause a problem with the time frame? Or we just meet once a month? Is that 20 days and 15 days? I just had that question, is that going to conflict with having to meet the planning commission? Those days may not work out depending on when they submit it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. We'll have to
But
look at it.
The timeline is not always going to work out. Based on when they submit it, that starts the clock. That 20 days and 15 days isn't going to work out to a 30-day planning commission meeting on that one time we have to meet with it.
Yeah, you remember
just a
we
question.
are doing the review first though. So there will be the red line and staff review first before it kind of goes into that
Just a thought.
next in that.
It may not always, but one of the things that I've noticed is we only meet once a month now, and they managed to wait until that meeting comes up, and as long as we put them on the next regular meeting, I think you're pretty much in compliance with it. You can't put them on a meeting that doesn't exist, so
That's true.
that's, as long as we don't delay it 2 or 3 meetings down the road. If you cancel December's meeting altogether, that could create a problem. We may have to take a look at where your meetings are located so that we at least have one meeting every month. That'd probably be the best way to do it.
Mr. Chair, is this the, I'm sorry. Is this the state imposed regulation?
Defer. We're going to defer to Jake and Gary on that one.
It is.
Yes.
Okay, so there's, seems like there has to be flexibility, like with in between meetings, or the time frame is with the state inflicting this on us. We're forcing this on us. There has to be some sort of an option that can allow a municipality, say like Morgan City, to, I mean, it'd be hard, like Ray's saying, to all of a sudden call everybody back. We got to have a meeting because it's within 14 days or 20 days. Is there something we can write in there that says per time frame of the meetings, like if it's once a month and it's the very, if it happens tomorrow, then it's a month before it gets there. Is that something you can write in and tell the state that's just the way it is, or?
What we could do, And there are some jurisdictions, many jurisdictions like ours. And what we could do is just put a provision in there that says that it's 20-day time period or the meeting closest to that 20 days. I think that's what we do.
Yeah, okay, I like that.
And that way, if they, what are they gonna say? There's not a lot you can say if you don't have meetings scheduled.
Yeah.
Do larger jurisdictions have more frequent meetings?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Layton's is every 2 weeks, so.
All right.
I don't see, unless it becomes really busy here, Morgan doing that, with,
No.
you have 1 or 2 applications
Hmm.
every so many months, so
Okay.
I think you'll be fine with that. So we'll put that in there.
And Mayor, in general, the timelines are fairly reasonable as I've looked at them, and there is a longer window for smaller cities. So yeah,
There's a longer, it's 30 days for smaller cities.
That's good. Smaller's better.
I didn't look at the timeframes. Which timeframe is it that has happened before they meet with the planning commission? Is it a 20-day or 15-day one? Which one of those happens prior to, and I'm sorry, I should look that up. I apologize for that.
so it's 15 on the pre-plat and 20 on the final plat, and that's for the first.
So we sit on a pre-plat then. So we're only 15 days from when they submit it to when we have to act on it.
No, we as staff have to complete our review
Okay.
cycle.
Okay.
That's not the planning
Then that
commission.
depends how long before they get it back to you. Okay.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Okay, some of the other sections, penalties, there's an appeal process. All of that is per state code on the appeal process. Text amendments, inactive applications, what happens when they start it and then they decide not to continue it, where does that fall and when do they need to start over? Something on exactions, if what can we legally require and ask for? Then we get into the preliminary plat. We have a whole process here on the preliminary plat, the application, the requirements on the preliminary plat. What do they have to provide? And just as a reminder, you have to provide the plat in terms of all the different lots and the layout, but then also improvement drawings. Your utilities, your grading, your roads, all of that. Section on staff review. Information on phasing. What happens if the preliminary plat expires? We'll get that one right. That great grammatical error there. Then we move into the final plat. And as I mentioned before, on a subdivision, planning commission will approve it. That's different than before. And then on the final plat, that will be staff review. And essentially that's planning, engineering, and legal make that approval. And then also there will be other signatures, for example, the mayor, fire, utilities. In terms of a requirement of documents, Everything we require is PDF, no print copies. And on the final plat, it's essentially the same information, just doing it all again, just kind of a double process for just really looking at that closely. And then in terms of constructing, once the final plat is approved, then they can move into construction. And either you build it all and then it's accepted and recorded, or you bond, well, and you bond, but if you're not completing something else all the way, then you can bond for that, and then it can record.
So at what point can they actually start selling lots
After it records.
after it records?
Yeah, and so there's a guarantee there that either it's already built and accepted, or there's money in place through a surety bond or some other acceptable form, that the city has the resources and the money from the developer to go finish that.
That'll take place when it's recorded.
Yes.
For clarification, I understand what Jake was actually described was, they don't have to have all the infrastructure and roads and stuff in first. If they choose to put a bond up, they can just have enough infrastructure in for that home to start being accessible. They don't have to have all the curb, gutter, sidewalks, asphalt, and everything put in if they choose to bond for that. They can start selling, building before that's all done. If they choose to bond for that, if they get recorded.
And there's a little bit of, there's a time benefit there, that if a subdivision is 90% done or 80% done, and there's the bonding to finish it, but someone wants to go ahead and get started on a home that's going to take 6 months or a year, they can excavate, pour footings, site preparation, all of that. They won't get a certificate of occupancy until it's been accepted.
So, Gary, this might be directed to you. So in the past, city council is given a final acceptance to a subdivision which releases the funding. So how does that take place now?
So before the funding is released?
Well, you know, in the past, the city
Oh, the
council,
bonds, on the bonds?
yeah, and you've had a final acceptance on that project, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
And that it'll work, it should work exactly the same way it's working now, in that there would be an application by the developer to release the bond. And then we would do a final acceptance letter.
who would approve that though? I mean, like, where would that go, that final acceptance?
Right now it goes to the council, isn't it?
In the past, I mean, but apparently not any longer, right? I guess that's my question.
I think the way that it's written is, I think it goes to staff. I don't think it goes to council
Yeah.
anymore. I think it goes to
Mm.
staff.
You mean,
So they would make the determination. That's because it doesn't go to the council anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was just curious who made that
Yeah,
determination.
I think that follows the state code updates.
I'll just double check, but I think I read that went to staff.
Section on paying property taxes, nothing exciting there. And then what we talked about, the recording of the final plat, which is still on Mylar. So essentially, that final is of course, it's plastic, but almost like paper. That's a summary. It's a lot. I don't know if there's any specific sections you want to dive into. What you saw, what was provided tonight is the same as last month, only just been tweaked and revised a little bit and refined.
Yeah, this is great, Jake. I appreciate that. And let's, any clarifications on specific sections, I think we'll discuss as a commission after the public hearing. But just to summarize, it is a lot. So this is a 50-page ordinance that we're looking to put to the city council to vote. And our task tonight is to provide a recommendation to the city council, favorable or not favorable. You have outlined, what precipitated this, the state updating code, the cities needing to come into compliance with that code. So therefore, we're making some changes. We clarify all the definitions into a centralized part of our code, adding some new definitions, revising some definitions, and then really putting forth, even though it's a very long 50-page complicated process, putting forth a roadmap for that, which I agree with Ray when he complimented the tables. That looks great. It gives a path not only for the applicants, but as a commission to know where our responsibility lies. That hasn't been entirely clear and has created some confusion in the past. So that's definitely good. Let's at this point, I'd like to open the public hearing. I want to do that through motion. If someone can take an action to do that, we'll open the public hearing, and then we'll go through that, and we'll also close through a motion as well.
Mr. Chair, I'll motion to open the public hearing.
Thank you. Second on the motion. All right, the public hearing is now open. So anyone who would like to approach the podium and share their comments and thoughts, please do so. Just start by stating your name, and we'll go from there.
Mayor, city council members, and planning commission, and others. I'm really here just to try and understand a little bit better a few things.
Will you state your name first?
Oh, my name is Brett Boss.
Thank you.
And here to just try and understand a few things. As I was going through this, we didn't get the documents on this until about Friday, I think it was, that we got the documents. And so I was trying to go through it some, but some of the big questions I had were, and it was really difficult to tell or very time consuming, how many of the definitions are coming from state statute versus things that we're adding because we feel we need to better define them. What areas of state statute, so I know the general purpose of this is to bring state statute into city ordinance. What areas of state statute involved interpretation of the state statute versus duplication of the state statute? How does this new process compare to the old process? And so that we could determine, is there anything that I should be concerned about? Does this affect existing subdivisions? And if so, how? And I mean, I really want to thank you for doing a summary first before opening it up for public comment. And as I was reading through this, I started wondering, what's kind of required, and I found a state statute about notices, and this is in Title 10, Chapter 9A, Part 2, Section 205, Subsection 3 of the state statute. It does say that in addition to the notice requirements described, for any proposed modification to the text of a zoning code, the notice posted in accordance with the subsections before it shall include a summary of the effect of the proposed modifications to the text of the zoning code designed to be understood by a layperson, and be provided to any person upon written request. And this is at the time of notice. So I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly what this means, but wondered what the city's thoughts were on that of a summary. Because the first summary I got was, or at least on the public notice, all it said was changes to definitions in 10, in part 10 or city ordinance section 10, and then also in part 8, which didn't give me very much information on that. So that's about all I have to say, is really more questions than I have any concerns at this point.
So Brett, thank you. Before you sit down, just a couple of clarifying questions. I appreciate you keeping your thoughts concise, and those are good questions. Not necessarily going to address those immediately, but we'll close the public hearing and get into a part of that. I do want to clarify, is your concern with respect to the interpretation of complying with the notification period and the summary of that statute that you quoted? Is that your concern? Or is your concern just as a private citizen having interest in the implications of the subdivision and not really understanding what's different?
Yeah, my concern, well, there's probably a few concerns there, actually. First concern is if we're, for the state statute, if we're not giving a summary in such a way that a layperson can understand it, then are we not going to get public involvement like we could otherwise? I don't know. But that's a concern I have, because to have 4 days to try and go through these 50 pages is quite a bit. I still don't, again, I don't know. I can't tell you what the difference is between what is now and what the new is. And then just trying to understand, I mean, I think it would make it a lot easier if I knew, okay, this is exactly what we're getting from state statute, and this is what we're interpreting it to, or, and here's where there's no, I mean, we're taking it straight from state statute, because then I would know, okay, it's the interpreted stuff, because I can't come here and ask you to change state statute or ask city council members to do that. So, so that, to try and give me the area that I should focus on, right, about what I should study. So I think those are the two major points of that.
Okay, thank you.
To try and, and back to the state statute, to just try and have more time. If I had 10 days, maybe I'd be a little bit better prepared. I don't know, to know if this is something I should be concerned about. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else want to share?
I'm Jill Boss. I just wanted to say thank you for preparing the whole table thing. That really clarifies a lot. And so I'm very appreciative of that. Just to help understand as a citizen what the process is, just for information, because we're just trying to learn what's going on and how the process all works. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Before moving on, can I ask a question, Gary, with respect to maybe your recommendation on how to proceed? I think the public input is just that, it's public input. On the other hand, if we can provide any insight, I'd like to. But if we can't or shouldn't, then you can guide me that way. But what are your thoughts?
Sure, I think we can provide some answers. I think the comments are great comments. outstanding comments.
Yeah, before closing the public hearing, so that Brett can have an opportunity to dialogue. If you wouldn't mind responding to some of the concerns that he'd raised, I'd appreciate that.
Sure, be happy to. I hope I catch them all, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. But they were very, very well put questions, very good questions. And I wish we had at every public hearing, people that were interested enough to be able to come out and look over 50 pages of subdivision ordinance and say, wow, what did they do here? What are they doing here? A lot of this comes to us because of changes up at the state in the attempt to provide for a faster review process, with the idea that perhaps a faster review process will actually produce more housing in the state of Utah. And so for 2 years, actually 3 years, state legislature has been narrowing it and narrowing it when it comes to the time we have to prepare and to take a look at subdivision approvals and also the requirements for subdivision approvals. 4 years ago, they took away our design. We weren't allowed to put any design criteria in. They kind of struck a whole bunch of things that we couldn't say subdivisions had to have in them. The subdivision ordinance is part of the zoning ordinance for the state of Utah. It's called LUDMA, Land Use Development Act is what it is, Management Act. And it's all enabling language is what it is in the state of Utah. There are some states where they're called Dillon rule states, where the state actually tells you what you can and can't do. But in the state of Utah, the language in the subdivision ordinance and the zoning ordinance are enabling provisions which enable a city to put into place ordinances that don't have to be exactly like what you've got in state code, except where it says it has to be exactly what it is in state code. And there are some places where they do that. In fact, this last year, they put into place a provision, and this is stepping right into the mayor's and the planning commission's area, but they said you have to have a pad in your back, out of your back door to land on when you actually bring the steps down. It has to be 32 square feet, no more than 32 square feet. That's becoming very much more like the Dillon rule states, where they're actually telling you what to do. They're becoming more like that. But right now, it's still what they call a Hutchinson rule state, which means that we can actually decide those things that we think are best for our community and put them into an ordinance and then send that to the city council. So the answer to your first question is no, all these definitions are not in state code. Many of these definitions come as a result of, over the years, Morgan City, just how development occurs in Morgan City and what Morgan City needs. And so that's where those come from. A lot of them are technical definitions that planners and attorneys come up with, which is a disaster. We always come up with more than we need to, right? And you've seen all the pages of definitions they have in there. But they're in hopes that it will clarify things for the applicant coming in. Those definitions are in place. These decisions regarding subdivisions are administrative decisions, so they're not subject to being messed with. Once you comply with all of the terms of the subdivision ordinance, we have to approve your project. And whereas in a legislative decision, what zone should it be? They don't have to approve your project. That goes to the city council, and they can actually change the zoning and the requirements for the zoning. They've got a lot more flexibility, but in the subdivision ordinance, we're presuming that those decisions have already been made, that this residential area is good for subdivisions. And these are the requirements. And once you meet them, we have to approve it. Duplication. So there is some duplication. For example, the takings provisions that we have, that they've got in here, what they call the exaction requirements, how much we take from a developer. I noticed that Jake had taken that directly out of state law. And that's just exactly the way state law reads. But the majority of things in here are Morgan provisions. Some of them are borrowed from other jurisdictions, but most of them come as a result of years of experience that Morgan has with development in Morgan. And that's where they come from. Comparison of old and new, Jake kind of went through that. It would have been good for you to have seen that beforehand. The gray is the old provisions, and the blue is the new. We do have some new definitions. The biggest change, and really, if he were to put out a summary, and you're right, we did not put out a summary that I know of, because typically the changes aren't that big. The changes we make can be described in the ordinance itself. That simply just says, this is an ordinance that is amending the subdivision code to amend the street width to 32 feet or whatever it happens to be. But this is a big one. And probably the best summary of what the changes that this ordinance really makes is in those charts that you saw. That is almost a complete summary of exactly what the legislature did to us over the last couple of years, and what this ordinance actually does. And it's called speed, speed, speed. Speed things up, speed things up, speed things up. And I think if we were to put out a summary, that would be what it would be, is it would be those 2 pages. You're right, we didn't do it, but we will do it before it actually goes to the city council for their approval. Yeah, we should probably do that. And if we do that, we would probably also allow for comment at the city council level from individuals like yourself who are interested in it. And so thank you for bringing that to our attention, because I did not see that we had not. I can see 50 pages is in a couple of days. Yeah, I did the same thing when Jake sent it to me. Right, exactly right. Easy reading material. Yeah, it's what you want to read in front of a fireplace on a cold night, if you want to get to sleep. So we'll correct that. We'll make that correction. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. But is there anything else that I missed?
A couple things. In terms of existing subdivisions, it does not affect them at all. It continues as is. Anything that's been, even subdivisions that have been approved but not built, it's going to happen however they were approved in the past. So they will continue.
Could I make just one exception to
Yeah.
that? And that is if a subdivision is amended, in other words, they want to divide the lots into smaller lots or something of that nature, an amendment would be subject to this, but as long as they remain the same as what was approved, it would not.
So subdivision within a subdivision.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything in the ordinance is following the state process. That's what it's all about. And the biggest difference is that one, there's this, everything is speed and timing, how many days to send it out, how many days to review, all of that, the red lines. The state has given cities 4 review cycles on a subdivision. And a review cycle is, it's been redlined, given to the developer. They have to address the comments and then send it back. Doesn't mean they have to exactly they have to address them, but also and send it back. But then we can't add new comments per review cycle. So there's 4 review cycles. We decided that to do 1 review cycle before it comes to planning commission, and then the 3 after. That's something where the state says you have 4, you can decide where and how you use them. We decided 1 before. And then also another big change is no longer will city council be approving the final plat. So that's the biggest change. Sorry, Tony. And so it's purely like Gary said, it's administrative approval. Doesn't meet the requirements, and if so or not. And a subdivision is not a rezone, has nothing to, a rezone is entirely different. So that's a big process there. And the state code dictates that the final plat review is staff level. It can't be. We have the option to make planning commission do the preliminary plat approval, and we decided to do that unless it was the small subdivision, the 5 lots or less. So everything that's in there in terms of process is all state code. If you look up Utah League of Cities and Towns subdivision ordinance, they have some good summaries in there of what the state requirements were. Utah League of Cities and Towns, a lot of good resources there on that.
Your questions are extremely good. Compliment you on it.
Brett, did that help, or do you have any clarifying questions beyond that?
And I will say that the new ordinance is significantly different than the old ordinance. And that's because of the process is very new. And the current, as of today, Morgan City subdivision ordinance is a compilation of 30, 40, 50 years of all kinds of things. And we went through it, with Planning Commission this summer, and we looked at it and we said, how can we make this fit the new? And it didn't work. It was, taking a completely different process and trying to make it, and it didn't work. So we took what was valuable to the city in terms of requirements and incorporated that into a new ordinance. So it was kind of this hybrid blend, but starting over and bringing in the new stuff to what we found to be the process. And that's where we added the tables, all these things.
We'll put those out. Make sure that people in the future have that. Because I think that would be very helpful before we approve the final draft. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for addressing those concerns. Any other comments before we close the public hearing?
And I just state also, there is the counterpart to the subdivision ordinance is the engineer has a set of standards that he deals with. Most of them are size of pipes and detention basins and that type of thing. But there are some things like the street cross sections that Jake was talking about, that are important to people that want to subdivide their property. That's approved once a year by the council, and that will be coming up in the future, probably in January, maybe, or before then, maybe on the street standards. That's what they were talking about earlier. If that's a clarification, there's another set of standards out there that are more particular or more focused on the actual infrastructure. So that helps.
Yeah, did you have a comment? No. All right. Seeing no further comments, let's close the public hearing. Since we opened with a motion, we need to close with a motion. So let's do that at this time.
I move to close the public hearing.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I think
All right, go ahead, Mark. Mark's got the second. All in favor? Public hearing is now closed. Let's take this up as a commission. I know we have some commissioners that have specific questions about some of the language. Some of the Jake guided us earlier that if there's grammatical or typos or things like that we want to review, let's do that after. But anything that we want to debate and get some discussion on, let's go ahead and review those together as a body right now.
I just have one easy question. Did we consider adding timelines to that chart of process so that it would be in one place to refer to easily?
We didn't look at that, no, but I like that idea. I'll look. That one, you can ask us to do it. I mean, that could be part of your recommendation. Or two, it could be consider how it would work, and we could take a look and see if it's, and then I could add it as like a red text so that council sees that we've added that.
Okay.
Back. That's great.
Mr. Chair, could I just make a comment? I was just looking at what the requirement is for smaller cities. And because Jake and I deal with the big cities a lot, or have in the past, but it's 30 business days for the initial review of a completed subdivision application, where it's 15 for the big ones.
Okay.
And then it is 40 days for a complete subdivision application after it's submitted for
30 and
less
40,
than-
not 20 and 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll fix that.
Yeah, so that gives us more time, to the mayor's point. So
And if we
I
hold
just
more
happened to
than one
notice
meeting,
that it was
we
different.
shouldn't run into trouble. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Matt and Justin. It's gone twice, it's changed twice now.
Oh, okay.
What other discussion items? Thank you for yours, Aaron. Appreciate that. What else?
I have one question, and maybe it's covered in here somewhere, and I don't know how to interpret it, but when somebody come to us to do a subdivision and they present a plat to us, is there, do we have any say on what type of structures are on that? Whether it be a single residence, whether it's condominiums, whether it's a combination of that? And there's a state mandate under this new attempt to provide more housing, affordable housing. There's a state mandate that we have a certain number of lower cost homes on that subdivision.
So, and that's where the chapter 10 would kick in. All of that would apply, the zoning.
Okay, to all under the zoning.
It's all under the zoning. It's a good question. It's all under the zoning in terms of what type of home or what type of building structures, accessory structures, all of that. And then your second question about affordable housing, no, that's not required. Cities of 5,000 population or greater have to turn in a moderate income housing plan every year with what they're doing on that. Our general plan does have recommendations and things we want to be working on as a city for affordable housing. But, so no, it's not in the subdivision. Larger cities have to turn that in every year. And we do have general ones in our general plan.
So this all comes under the zoning area
Yes.
rather than under the subdivision
Correct. Yeah,
definition.
this is really about divide.
We call affordable housing, which is it's sort of a speak with forked tongue. But so just the basic facts, the elementary schools and the middle schools are both going down in enrollment for the past couple of years. The high school's up because possibly that's a family that's had time, that maybe they're moving into a bigger home, or
If you speak into a mic, you can.
This is just an FYI. I'll piggyback on what the mayor just said. And what's really interesting is when, in that COG meeting, we look at growth, we look at building permits that have been issued. Out there in the county, there was what, 366 or so? Almost 370, and a large percentage of them would be down in the north end of the county, down in the Mountain Green area. Interestingly enough, the one school that has lost the most enrollment is the Mountain Green Elementary School, and it's way down in the last 5 years. So, yeah, something's going on there. Like, people are not moving to that area with young families. They just, my assumption is they can't afford it. Yeah.
Thank you. With respect to the proposed subdivision ordinance, what else comes to mind for discussion? I won't belabor this. If there's no further discussion, we can take action, but.
What's the action we're gonna take on this?
We provide a recommendation to the city council.
So if I meet with whoever wants me afterwards, and there are several things they change, how does that affect our recommendation?
Well, let's, Gary, Jake, if we make a recommendation at this point to the city council, Ray's asking if he's coming after to make some grammatical changes and things, how might that affect the recommendation?
You're fine to do that. I've actually got some things that I went through the ordinance today and just some technical changes that
To
Jay
change
made.
before it goes to the council?
we go over it. They really don't substantively affect it, but they need to be corrected before we go to the council. So,
Okay.
so that's fine, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and then if any of those changes are not technical or grammatical, okay,
Yeah,
then that might warrant something different, but,
didn't change the intent of it at all.
okay. All right. Well, I'm not seeing further discussion at this point, so let's take action and either provide a favorable recommendation to the city council or not. As you'd mentioned earlier, Aaron, you talked about potentially adding that condition. So that's an option as well, so.
I would love to see that added. If I were going through this process, that's the first thing I would do, is go through and write down all of the deadlines and the timelines. I liked your suggestion, though, of adding it potentially in red, and then the city council could see it as an option, whether they wanted to make it part of the document or not. So what would the language be to propose that?
Maybe adopt these two regulations with the addition of.
But
That's fine.
with the conditional addition of, with the suggestion of?
Just with the addition of.
Okay, and then the city council can decide whether or not
They
to
want to do
accept
it.
them.
And just to clarify, it's a recommendation to the city.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Mm.
So are we accepting motions?
Yes,
All
please
right.
do. If you're ready, I'll take it.
I'm not sure. I move that we recommend this document. See, I wasn't ready. Thank you. Ordinance update Title 11 subdivision regulations and the amending ordinance. Can we do them both at once? Title 10 definitions to the city council for approval with the addition of the timelines to the subdivision approval process chart.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Justin. Before we vote, any discussion on this motion? All right, all in favor? It's unanimous. So,
Could you do a roll call on that?
sure.
Mr. Chair?
Roll call. All right. So just name by name. I don't think we've ever done a roll call before. Justin?
Yeah, Justin Reese.
Aye.
Aye.
Mark Francis, aye.
Nathan McClellan, aye.
Bill, aye.
Aaron Bott, aye.
Okay, motion passes. We will now move to the third agenda item, which is a discussion regarding the trails, parks, and downtown master plan. There are updates that we've been working on here as well, part of our work session tied into this conversation. And we will continue that work here in the general session. Jake, would you provide a summary of our task and discussion plan for tonight?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this year we've been working on the Morgan City Trails, Parks, and Downtown Master Plan. Recently, we closed the public survey, and I wanted to share the results of that public survey with you. We can discuss it as well. In terms of notifying the public of the survey, it was on the city website. It went out twice with the billing, the utility billing. And then we felt like we needed even more results. So we went ahead and we did a mailer. And hopefully you received those because we sent out 1,500 mailers through the post office to every door. And the numbers did go up. We did see results of that. So I want to share with you the results of the survey. And in general, who took it was mostly Morgan City residents, some that live in the county, and then a few that have property in Morgan but do not live here. In terms of age, we had a pretty good spread in terms of, this top question, how long have you lived here? Of course, a few newcomers, but people have been here a long time, 6 to 20 years, and then also 20 years plus. You see that at almost 40% lived here longer than 20 years. And then in terms of our age, quite a bit in that middle age with some younger folks and a little bit more experienced as well. We asked which scenario do they like for shopping and retail? And they liked the scenario that focused on the walkable commercial street area. That was the preferred. The second was reimagine State Street, kind of slowing State Street down, making that more of a walkable mixed use area. And then the third option, which had the least, was kind of continuing business as usual, building on our existing assets. And again, that was focused on shopping, retail, those kinds of activities. The next question was about which scenario in terms of commercial street, what would they like to see on commercial street? A trail on the north side of the street, outdoor dining, active outdoor gathering areas, plazas, just kind of places for people to gather. Those were the big items. A little bit more with mixed use buildings. And then also, we'll see it down lower, but those favoring closing that intersection of Commercial Street and State Street and rerouting that through as well. So the city's currently working on acquiring land for an alley to provide additional parking behind Commercial Street. We asked, what should that alley look like? And the majority wanted that alley to have some outdoor dining, some pedestrian space, not just parking cars. That was the lowest option. People want more out of that alley space. And then the question about the State Street area, what would people like to see on State Street? A pedestrian light. So you push the button, it starts flashing, and you can cross. at one or two locations. That was very favorable. People really liked having some commercial down by the riverfront. Maybe some outdoor dining or retail or something right there on the river, taking advantage of that. And then also wider sidewalks and paved trails on State Street. And then in terms of housing, how to provide more housing, the scenario with having housing in Commercial Street downtown area, that's the one in the lighter blue, that was higher. There's the percentages right there at 50%, 51%, and then 21% on State Street, and then also 27 on building on existing assets. And that the housing by downtown Commercial Street had some within kind of the Commercial Street alley area, but then also looking at options for the mobile home park behind and some of that area around there. So the question was, in terms of again, mentioned that closing the Commercial Street and State Street, where commercial goes into state, and more people liked it on 400 East and Commercial Street, and then a smaller on Commercial Street and Industrial Road, but not a huge difference there. And then the last one, is just kind of leave it as is.
So
And-
that, excuse me, that would mean where you come under the railroad, you couldn't turn left onto Commercial Street.
Correct. You would either go past 7-Eleven,
Right.
take a left right in there, or you keep going and you hit Industrial and you take a left in there. In terms of accidents in Morgan City, they're almost all there. If you look at a heat map of car accidents, it's all at that, and not just at the Commercial and State, but the whole interchange area. The sight lines are horrible. It's obviously congested, but the big thing is the sight lines and the turn angles and all that. None of that would fly in today's engineering world. Okay. Which roadway strategy do you prefer for State Street? People want to see more, again, pedestrian lights, crosswalks, those kind of things. A little bit less on like reducing travel speeds with traffic calming methods such as bulb outs, street trees. I don't think we do speed bumps, but that could be one, but that's not. And then a smaller again, you'll notice the least wanted to do nothing there, that top bar. I think everybody recognizes that State Street is not a safe place for people walking or biking.
So Jake?
Yes.
Adding crosswalks and pedestrian lights on State Street seems pretty simple.
Yeah.
Why is it not? Do we have to go through UDOT? for that?
Yes.
Do we have to have a?
Yes.
They have to do a whole traffic study?
I don't think
all
we
of
have to, I don't know about that, but yes, it does require UDOT approval and working with them. And part of the study is where, which streets are the best to have that. And then the technical part, where does the light go, the power, all of that. So.
Mr. Chair, so I was defending this again yesterday in an RPO meeting, and UDOT was represented there, and I told UDOT they've done some horrible planning because it's the same amount of exits and on-ramps that they did back in 64, I believe, 62, when the freeway came in. And our population's more than doubled since, all those decades ago. And I brought up a point. I stopped in Snowville a few weeks ago, There's a couple gas stations there, has some restaurants, a little convenience store, and there's a couple of diners. And they actually have a push button crosswalk.
Well,
And Snowville's a whole bunch smaller than Morgan.
yeah, it is. And they have two interchanges.
Yeah, yeah. So I did suggest to the UDOT rep, I know his dad real well, like way good. And I just said that your dad would be disgusted in you. Because really there hasn't been any future or any planning since they first put it in. It's just all the same as it was, and we do have different needs. So I know you can't just light a fire under them. You actually have to create a big fire. But I told UDOT that they're not gonna like my face, because I'm gonna just hammer this until they can sit down and let's talk about it.
Definitely warrants a discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you for the advocacy.
Mayor, I don't know if they mentioned this, they have promised us resources to do a detailed transportation plan. We don't have a date yet, nor what those funds are, but
Yeah, they
One
brought
of
that
those
up.
verbal
They
promises for a
brought that
couple
up
years
and I
now.
said, actually, all you'd have to do is talk to people that have lived here for a few years and you'd have your plan in order and the needs. But yeah, there's always has to be a study. I agree, but
I don't think we need a study for a pedestrian light. I'm talking more about the big picture things, the freeway interchanges and you notice I said interchanges so that we're thinking 10, 20, 30, 40 years out. And then some of the other streets that they control and other ones that we control.
true.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know you're on it, but even outside of the pedestrian piece, just as Jake mentioned, that collaboration, UDOT and unfortunately the railroad. Yeah, for that interchange, clearly needs some attention. So thank you.
Okay, these next two questions kind of moving more into transportation a little bit and piggybacking on that conversation. We asked how important was improving the street network in the city. 20% at very important, and then almost 50% at important. So those two together is about 70%. And I think that goes really well with the subdivision ordinance where we have the sections on the street connectivity part.
Just a quick question. You may have opened with this and I missed it. We've got the percentages broken out. What was the total count of respondents?
I think about 150.
150 people. And
Yeah.
what's that as far, so up 10% if you send out 1,500 households?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
10% response rate.
And in terms of planning, it's very comparable to what you typically see.
Okay.
I've seen with Ogden is doing a general plan update and they just got 300 to 400 responses on surveys and all that. And of course, Ogden is giant and a lot more. So, and the other thing, this survey is not a 2-minute easy survey. You have to actually think about it. And also we have links and we really encourage everybody to look at the maps, the 3 scenario maps, come to the workshops, all of that. So there's a time commitment behind this. So I always keep that in mind too. It's not a 2-minute survey. It's probably 10 to 20 minutes in terms of response time. In terms of adding sidewalks, very important and important. Morgan residents want to see sidewalks. Okay, that's that one. Which trails would you most like to see developed? This gets into the Weber River trail, that really is the backbone of the trail system. That's what we have, it's what residents want. And I think that's the vision we're seeing coming together is that, you know, you can go from the fairgrounds all the way to the sewer past on the Weaver River Trail. And then the next one is actually the dirt trails on the foothills. That's what folks want to see. And then after that, obviously, it gets down into some of the other ones. You'll see the third item down the bottom, trail connections to cross existing barriers, like the freeway, the railroad, and the river. And that's really difficult. I think that's going to be the freeway and the railroad actually, I think, are harder than the river in terms of figuring out how to cross that safely. But this is great. This gives us a vision of what residents are saying in terms of a trail system. And the thing about, I've mentioned before, there's a lot of money out there. The state is spending more money on trails than ever before. It's unprecedented, the amount of grant money that's out there. And once you have an approved trail plan and you have willing landowners, then you can really start to get things to pick up in terms of trail improvements. The state won't pay for land, generally speaking, other than maybe a NICA course or something, but they will pay for improvements if you have a plan and you have willing landowners. And it can be public or private landowners. So if in the foothills, if there's landowners that'll work with us, we could be doing some trails. This matches up. We asked which overall trail concept are you most excited about? And you'll see the one with the third one in with the Weber River, the paved trail, that was the most desirable. And then the second was the natural surface trails. Okay, we're almost done here. Just a few more questions. Which type of trail are you and your household most likely to use? Natural surface trail and then a separated trail. Less bike lanes and less sidewalks. Then we asked about how should we pay for the trails, and people like the low hanging fruit. I think that would be grants, or what we talked about this earlier. If a developer is willing to put in a trail as they build a subdivision, that's a good opportunity. And then also, and the most desirable there is develop a phase plan and really go after it. I think that's kind of what they're saying there. Then a little bit on terms of tax increase, and then their number 4, 14% don't invest in trails. Okay, we asked about parks. And of course, they're in red. The idea of the emerald necklace on the park, that there's multiple parks, and you really have this already. It's more expanding it and looking for opportunities. There's the county fairgrounds, which is not in the city. The Wilkinson Center's kind of a park, and then the Riverside Park, and then the land that the city owns west of State Street that's been talked about as a fishing pond park. And so you already have all that. So maybe just a few more heading west in terms of that. And then a little bit less down the line, a regional park. And then also a neighborhood park north of I-84. I think that's important as well. So we asked it, and this is an if question. Okay, we're not, it was written in a way to not promise a rec center, but if there was a rec center, where should it go? And people like it near the schools. I have heard that some from the schools don't necessarily love that because it'll make it even more congested, but also it does bring resources together, which can be really nice. And then we asked, how should that be paid for? Grants, the city and the school district and the county. That's where the dots are going to the county there. Like I said, the city, the school district and the county working together, user fees, paying for part of it, and then, donor fundraising, putting somebody's name up on it and typically it takes a lot of different resources to do that. In terms of implementing like some recreation, more opportunities. People like the idea again of a plan and then going after that over time with phases. And then also taking some of these advantage. For example, where the new trail goes under the Young Street Bridge, the city owns both sides of those properties. So we've kind of been talking about, could that be a little mini park in the city? You know, right now it's just some weeds and a new nice parking lot and a trailhead, but there's opportunity there for some park amenities, which is also on the river right there. And so that would be, again, some of the low hanging fruit opportunity. And then also acquiring new land, that's important. Morgan's a growing community with the desire for more recreation and getting that land is important. It's really hard and difficult to go back and get the land once you know something is built. So if you can get the land as you grow, that's most important. So we asked what river-related activities or ideas people would like to see. Really kind of a mix here on that. Certainly the paved trail is the big one, but also fishing, maybe some kayaking on the river. Coming in number 2 is swimming or wading in the river. And then also making it a little bit, it's making it navigable. So those check dams, which are important but difficult, seeing if there's a way to work with those on it.
Quick question for you on
Yep.
that. The other category is a little bit bigger than what was put into the other category? Was that-
Yeah, I don't have those comments with me. I'll go back, I'll send those out.
I was just curious, in other parts of the survey, it talks about commercial along the riverfront as well.
Yeah.
I wondered
If that was yeah. I didn't have that in this part, but I'll go back. Yeah, that'd be really nice right there at State Street and the rivers. There's some properties there. I think that's the other is actually this. So it's the 4% there. That's the tiny little sliver is the other. Yeah, it's
5%, right?
yeah, yep, 4.7 there. Okay, just last slide here. So we asked which overall scenario do you prefer? And coming in at the highest was not necessarily a specific one, but choosing from the different components. I think that's great. People said we like these ideas from these 3 different scenarios. Let's create a new vision from the different ideas. And then after that, the walkable downtown and then reimagine State Street coming in at number 3 and then building on existing assets last. And then this is a question that is interesting to do and it always seems to change a little bit when you say, okay, when we're thinking about our kids and grandkids, what should we do? And you'll notice that coming in, the compilation is about the same, but then the walkable downtown kind of bumped up and the other ones bumped down. Well, the reimagined State Street went down a little bit. No, that one went up. But so actually the no clear preference came down and tied with the walkable downtown where that changed. So in terms of looking at what's best for kids and grandkids, people like the walkable downtown just a little bit better. That's a summary of it. the next step is taking this information and creating a new vision for the downtown and a trails plan and a parks plan. They'll be draft mode, they'll be in draft, you'll be able to respond to and look at. And from there, it'll kind of work its way into more of a specific plan. So a vision and a specific plan for trails and parks in the downtown. And then the final thing is a new ordinance for the downtown.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate that, and closes the loop on the survey, makes the results part of the public record. Appreciate you walking through that in such detail. Just to clarify, next steps then, you just outlined them. Would you do that one more time?
Yes. So taking this information and the feedback from the public, we're going to create a vision for the trails, like a draft trails map. Also a draft park concept. And also we'll be looking at how to improve existing parks. So what can we do to Riverside to improve that park? What can we do to Fox Point? Can we add some amenities? And then also ideas for additional parks. And then also ideas for the downtown, what, you know, the State Street, the things that we've talked about with the pedestrian lights, the crosswalks, and also making the commercial street area a little bit more mixed use and walkable.
So ones that designate the maps, you know, with the plan.
Yes.
And then 2 would be to codify that.
That's probably 3. So what one would be the maps, and 2 would be kind of a actual plan document that you'll get a review, and we're looking at it as an addition to the general plan. So maybe it goes in the appendix or is just part of that general plan vision. And then the third part is an ordinance update. So what do we need to do to make these things happen? More of that is in the downtown part.
So could that impact, you know, hypothetically, future zoning decisions and things like, let's say we come up with, because in the general plan, there's that river, I forget what we call it, but we don't have a river zone.
Right.
But we could.
Definitely.
And enable some of these things, that it has to have a trail that allows you to pass through it. It has to have this. That would be all part of this next steps you're talking about.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. Any feedback or comments from the commission?
Just one, I'm trying to find it. You have not seen the county's active trails, active transportation plan yet?
Yeah,
Or
I
did-
have.
You did, okay.
Yeah.
You have a copy of it?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think as a city, we're surrounded by the county and
Yeah.
this all plays into that. So I was trying to find a digital copy that we could distribute and share too, because I think it'd be interesting for everybody to see.
Yeah.
So I'll keep working on that, but if you've got one,
Okay,
Then maybe
it's
send-
buried somewhere in an email or something, so.
okay. I think that'd be just helpful to understand, as we talked about in the work session, you know, because the idea is to get all the parts of the valley to connect, and if we can get them to connect into our commercial center and where all the parks and commercial opportunities are, then that's what we want. And that can't happen just in the city limits, it has to come from the outside. So
Well, of course, and the request for dirt trails in the foothills, most of those may actually be in the unincorporated county, and so I think that part as well.
So if I may just jump to, like, after we've got a plan, in the execution of that plan, who at the city level is the main person to go forth and prosper there? Is that Mr. Bailey?
I think he's definitely leading the charge. I'd be happy to help him. What's been the process for getting the grants and putting in the trails that you've done the last few years?
Well, those would make sense. Let me be more specific. There's gonna be that discussion with the landowners, right?
Right.
Like, who's going to have that difficult
Oh,
and sensitive discussion
yeah.
with all the different stakeholders, landowners that are in these pieces of property that would be required to make the trail systems work. Is that Ty? Or is there somebody else that we in the future need to find? Or is it you?
I can do some of it. I think it may depend on the situation. In some cases, we'll have the trail on the map, and I think we just want to have a conversation with the owner saying, if your property is developed in the future, we'd like to have a trail here. That's, that's what we did with the Russell Turner subdivision. That showed up applying for a rezone. And we saw that that's on our general plan trails map. And so we called a meeting and met with them. And of course, you saw part of the result of that. So there's that process. There's also what you're talking about is let's go out and find these landowners and talk to them and really kind of say, can we make these trails happen? And I think that's a very proactive approach that you're talking about there.
Well, if I may offer, so this is also a recent change. There was a Mountain Green Trails Foundation that was recently changed to a Morgan Valley Trails Foundation.
okay.
It's like happening right now.
Yeah.
And we had a meeting at the last ATAB meeting discussing this, and we invited the Eden Trails. It wasn't a foundation; it was some other group.
Park City has one of those that's very good.
And they have built an amazing system of trails over there around Pine View, up in the foothills. They've added 3 more trails just, this year, like they're going. Would it make sense at that point to have the city work closer with that foundation, that trails group, to help with that advocacy, talking to them? Because sometimes someone from the government or, local or federal knocking on your door saying, hey, we want to talk about your property, doesn't go over very well.
Yeah.
That we can do that though, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Mr. Mayor.
I'll just put it, Justin, that probably about at least half of the landowners that are in the area of this general plan trail system in the city have talked to me. Some are friendly, some aren't, but I would throw my hat in. I'd be more than happy to go see residents and talk. Some don't like me, some might, I don't know. But somebody's got to knock on the door at some point, and I'd sure be willing to do that.
No question. So are we proposing that we buy this property for them, or they just let us put a path through their property?
We create an incentive for them to be willing to
Yeah.
allow that. to
Yeah.
happen.
I would hope that we wouldn't have to write a check out for most of it, because that wouldn't go over well either. But there's actually a couple of them that wouldn't mind their name carrying on in a positive way. So you just have to try, right? You have to get it started and move it however you can. But yeah, I'd throw my hat in.
Well, I think with that, and again, this is my opinion of it, is what I would hate to do is have a public map full of all these trail systems, go out, and then everyone be like, wait, what? Like, this is on my property and I didn't talk, no one's talked to me about this. It just would be smart to do some of the advocacy.
Well, most of the comments from the people that have talked to me was from the meetings, the public that showed up for trails. And it was sort of funny that if you have a big, what we'd call a big landowner along a trail, didn't necessarily want it on his, but he wouldn't mind it on the other guys. So, but you just have to work at it.
I just think in the efforts that we have, that we do a lot of, we can set up an environment where we have a plan, we have this, but when the rubber meets the road or dirt hits the trail, however we want to call this here, we've got to have, there's got to be some group, some person to take that next step. And I think you know, it's a good time to consider it now. And we have, I think, some good options happening, coordination with the county, but also coordination with that new Trails Foundation. So
Right. That's a good resource.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. We are at the conclusion of our agenda. Before we adjourn, is there any final comments that should be shared? That being said, we will wrap there and this meeting is adjourned.